River Jordan, down between the two. And over there, on the other side of the Jordan, twice as far away as the Jordan is from the Mediterranean, way over there, in what is close to the border between Jordan and Iraq today, is this big city, Ramoth-Gilead. And Ahab is feeling tough. Let's go plunder Ramoth-Gilead. And Jehoshaphat says, fine, I'll go with you. My troops are your troops. Now that's a stupid thing to do just to start off with. But that's where Jehoshaphat got sucked in. Let's go plunder. Now the prophet of God says, we talked about this last week, to Ahab, you're not going to come back alive from this. And Ahab says, put him in jail until I come back alive. He says, well, you're not coming back alive. So they go to war, and Ahab persuades Jehoshaphat to wear his royal robes. He says, now, I'm going in disguise, says Ahab. I'm afraid they'd come after me. Because, you know, the king, they want to kill the king first. That would destroy the army. But you wear your royal robes, and I'll go in disguise. Jehoshaphat says, okay, cool. Hello? What's going on in the man's mind? So they go into battle, and Jehoshaphat comes out alive, but some guy just flicking an arrow off in the direction of the enemy camp hits Ahab in a chink in his armor, and Ahab is wounded and dies. And Jehoshaphat gets back safe. Fierce battle. Ahab stands in his chariot and dies at sunset. Now, after Jehoshaphat comes back safe, we have the chapter that we just read today, where Jehoshaphat has a little breathing room and he starts to do some good things. Then we have the other story that we talked about last week, where some people do invade. 3 big, powerful nations, enemy nations on their borders, come over, and you know what happens. We remember last week, and I think this is one of the neatest stories in the Old Testament. But the interesting thing, there's so many interesting things about it. What caused the victory that we talked about last week? What brought about the victory? Jehoshaphat has a small army, 3 huge, powerful nations on the other side, 3 of the current Arab neighbors. It would be like having Jordan and Iraq and Syria all coming together to fight against him. What do you think caused the victory? Remember the story from last week? Do I have to go over it again? Let me go over it again briefly. Jehoshaphat goes in prayer to God, says, there's 3 big guys coming after us, what do we do? And a prophet says, don't worry about a thing, God will take care of it. All you have to do is sit and watch. Just watch. Send the army out, but they won't have to do any fighting, they'll just sit and watch. So Jehoshaphat says, okay, and he orders the singers from the priests. You know, the priests are divided up into various duties. And one group, started by King David, is to make music for the Lord. There's a big group that does nothing but play instruments and sing and make music. So the prophet has told him, tell them to go out first, to lead the army. Put the singers out in front. So the singers go out in front leading the army, and when they get there, they find that the enemy has all kind of gotten into a scrum with each other. They've all killed each other. These 3 nations have their own issues with each other, and they kind of, somehow they got triggered, and they've all killed each other. So there's nobody left there. Now, what was the cause of the victory? Was it the music? No. Was it the faith?
Yes.
Yes. Was it God's victory?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, which was it? Was it Jehoshaphat's faith, or was it God's victory? Yeah, somehow they work together, don't they? It's not an either or. And that's one of the most important things I want you to see out of this Old Testament. It's never an either or. When good things happen, Was the victory because those guys over there hadn't really gotten their act together and because they all hated each other and fought each other and killed each other? Yes. Was it because of Jehoshaphat's faith? Yes. Was it because of the Lord? Yes. They're all coordinated. They're all working together. And you'll also find this when bad things happen. What happens when they lose a war? Was it that God didn't fight for them? Right. Was it because the other guys were really rowdy, big, bad bullies and wanted to come get them? Right. Was it because they themselves had been disobeying God, had been living immorally and worshiping false gods and burning their children alive as sacrifices and stuff like that? Yes. It's because they had weakened themselves, they had sinned, and there was judgment, and there was the other envious neighbors. So there's always this combination, and they always are three ways of defining the same thing, which always has all of these different elements involved. Aristotle, Greek philosopher, said that there were four causes to everything. There are four causes. When you look at something and say, there's a statue, what are the causes of the statue? The four causes of the statue. He says, well, there was a material cause. That's the marble. There was a formal cause. That's the model. That's the statue. That's what the statue was meant to come out looking like. You have that image that you want to make. You have the marble and you have the model. Then you have the efficient cause, and that's the sculptor with his hammer and chisel and all that. Those also are the causes of the statue. And finally, and this to Aristotle is one of the most important, you have the final cause. In Greek, the teleological cause, the end result cause. Why was this man making the statue in the first place? And the answer is he wanted to make a great image of the god Zeus or the goddess Athene to put in a temple. It was part of his worship. So the cause of the statue was worship, the cause of the statue was the sculptor, the cause of the statue was the marble, the cause of the statue was the model. These are all causes of the statue. Well, you can see how they all contribute and how that all works in. And so here we have causes of this amazing victory of Jehoshaphat. It was the disunity in the invading army. It was Jehoshaphat's faith. It was the prophet Jahaziel who came and told him what to do. That was important. And it was God. All of these things work together, and here comes out this story. But the story is a story of the way things happened when God was not in anybody. God suddenly came upon this prophet. Here's Jehoshaphat the king. He's been praying. He wants an answer from God. Where is he going to get it? All of a sudden, some guy, Jahaziel, starts going through all kinds of antics, jumping up and down, and the contortions and all. Prophets often used to do that in those days. Because something came on them that was bigger than they were, controlled them. They lost control of their own movements and of their own speech, and they would then, God would speak through them. So this prophet Jahaziel, God's Spirit came on him, and he was a mouthpiece for God, who said, here's what to do. So Jehoshaphat's faith then comes into play. He goes down on his face to the ground. He says, I believe that. I believe that's the way God works. And I believe that God said that, so we're going to do it. Now, God doesn't work that way these days. We don't see anybody go into contortions and say, I have a word from the Lord. Well, you do in some churches. But it usually is fake. I don't say it always is. But there isn't much of that, because God gives his words now through his Spirit direct to your heart. And he gives it to everybody.